welcome to the objective review, the very, very, very objective review of the horrible movie, The Last Airbender.
Probably too objective, actually.
It's possibly too objective because we find some decent things to say about this film. But in the objective review, I break the movie down into 6 categories and assign weights of them depending on the genre to have the most honest, unbiased, objective review as possible. And I'm sure you've noticed this other person sitting next to me. If you notice on the podcast, you know who this is. This is Shawn. He co-hosts the podcast with me after our last podcasters. And if you've been following along, we just watched The Last Airbender.
It's really nerve-wracking to do a movie review because it seems like much bigger than, like, when we review an episode, like, if I have weird ideas on rankings, like, it's no big deal. It's just one episode out of 60. It's like doing a movie. I feel like I actually have to really try and focus. It feels like a bigger deal, but at least it's just this movie, so, you know.
It's a very big deal. This is if anyone wants to go find the most objective view of the movie, this is honestly where you go. If you search objective movie review, my name will probably be the third on that list.
No spoilers. This is probably the softest review of this movie.
I mean, we
not the nicest, but just generally.
There's nothing to spoil in this movie besides. I mean, there is, I guess, but if you've seen the show, you get a general sense of this film.
I think that's fair. Yeah. And I think we're very fair here, too. I appreciate what we've tried to do. Try and very little hive-mindy. We would find something, we'd be like, yeah, and then we'd try really hard to look for something similar to that again. And be like, oh yeah, there it is again. It's good. See, good things.
Yeah. If this is the first time visiting, we do a podcast about Avatar: The Last Airbender fairly frequently, and also I do a lot of movie reviews where I try to give the most honest, objective review as possible. And because we're huge fans of the show, this is coming into conflict a little bit here, but I do think we do a fairly good job.
This will not replace one of your regularly scheduled movie reviews because it's not worth that.
Which they're not regularly scheduled.
I actually figured you had like every week, every Friday, I want to go see this movie. I assumed you had a regular operating schedule.
Sort of. Oh. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started, I suppose. We'll give our first objective thoughts, and I think we'll kind of probably dig into the movie a little bit more subjective after we give our objective rating. All right, so first category is story, and I will say the story, it's the story of Avatar: The Last Airbender. If it was just bunched up into a lot of just different crap, and also they take out certain elements that were pretty vital to the story, but the general plot is the same.
What they chose to take out and what they chose to leave in is baffling. But the structure of book 1 of Avatar: The Last Airbender is there, and that's not a bad thing.
It's fairly there.
Yeah.
And I think we were saying before, so in a video I have about the things that the Netflix show should do, I mentioned that Aang should have a little bit more of an arc, or if he doesn't have an arc, make him more influential and inspiring on other people. This movie tried to do some of that, but I think it really failed a lot, which makes me kind of want to take back my suggestion just a little bit.
It just went to the other. When you're saying have an arc, you want some dynamic. You want Aang at some highs and some lows. And this movie is just the opposite of the TV show. It was just all drama, all lows. Yeah. Not like real drama, like poorly manufactured drama. So I don't even know that it's fair to say that it tried those. So your suggestion, your suggestion holds true. It just took the other side of Aang too far, and it's not good. No. So no, don't get down on yourself. Also, go watch that, which is probably more interesting than watching us talk about this movie.
Yeah,
that was a good video, by the way. I enjoyed it.
Well, thank you.
Gave me hope after watching this, or before watching this. But you know what I mean.
That was the goal, and in this movie, just
it
shot
did,
that
yeah.
hope.
It actually did make me more apprehensive about certain things, but I think it'll be great. I'm not gonna let this movie affect my opinions.
Yeah. But in this movie, there's a general plot of the Avatar has to stop the Fire Nation, although they don't really say why. They don't really mention the comet. So
until the deleted scene.
Yeah. Well, no, that was the end scene. That was the end credit scene in that one. But they don't give you that ticking time bomb of like Aang has to do this for this certain time frame. And so that just lessens the conflict in the story. And speaking of conflict, this movie completely lacks, I think, on a lot of the conflict that happens in between the characters. Like, characters are just, they're so separated, which is weird to say because Avatar, I feel like everything is connected. But here they all feel very separated.
And going back to what you're saying about the story, also is that you said ticking time bomb, and that's really appropriate because there's never a sense of urgency, even against the fight. You know that he's supposed to kind of stop the Fire Nation, but you're not really sure why.
Yeah.
But it never really even feels that way. It just sort of feels like bouncing from one piece of storyline to the next until they happen to collide. Like, you never get the same build up at all. So I think that's where the lack of conflict comes into, or where it feels like a lack of real conflict. It feels like they just happen to end up at the North Pole together.
Yes. And gosh, I feel like I should take back my rating here, but there's also exposition, and I think about exposition when it comes to story because how you're kind of telling the story, and there's so much exposition in this film. I think I estimated. I'm not gonna watch this movie again.
Don't do it.
I've watched this movie 5 times in a row. No, I'm sorry. I'm completely misspoke there. I've watched this movie 5 times in the span of its existence. Jeez, what type of torture would that be to watch this movie 5 times in a row?
I've never watched a good movie 3 times in a row. Like a good movie, I might watch it back to back.
I watched when I was a kid. I would watch The Lion King probably 3 times back to back in a row.
Yeah, but when you're a kid, you'll pop in anything. That's and then true. That don't even count. That don't even count.
But my point is, I think there was this movie of that dialogue. I think 70% of it is just pure exposition and done in the most horrible way possible.
I have nothing to add to that. It's absolutely true. It's really, really. And I was talking to Chris more than I was listening to the dialogue. And then when I'd stop and pay attention, I'd be like, I don't need to listen to this. Yeah. So terrible.
Yeah. The
terrible dialogue.
Yeah. The story, and my score here on the story is purely reflective of the overall plot of Avatar, the first season, which this movie kept some of it. And then, so I can't knock it down too far into an area where people probably think it should be knocked down to. So for me, the story gets a 7 out of 10.
I went with a 5 out of 10, and I'm going to try my best to come up with an analogy on the fly, which is like if you took your favorite picture of yourself to a caricature artist and you're like, here, capture this in terrible form. And so you can still like tell it's there, but it's really bad and stupid. But I gave it a 5 just thinking it keeps enough of what you're after watching an Airbender movie, I suppose.
All right, the next category is emotion, and this movie just was completely lacking in emotion. And part of that is because the acting was terrible, part of that is because the dialogue was terrible, but also there was just no feeling there in a lot of it, especially with Aang. Like when Aang had to deal with Monkiato's death, when I deal with these things, I just wasn't feeling any of that at all. I mean, maybe we felt a little bit of that with Zuko and some scenes with Iroh.
I think they try to compensate for like good, real, genuine feeling with like a sense of drama that they try really hard to keep and maintain. But it just comes out kind of flat and it kills any emotion for the most part that you would have.
Yeah, and it's interesting to talk about emotion because Katara is like one of the most emotional people, right? She gets ripped off for being emotional all the time. And not a single moment in this movie did I feel any ounce of emotion from her. It was just so flat to the point of non-existence.
You don't get any of the dynamics between like later at the end of this season. At the end of the season is one of our favorite fights of the entire season, and it demonstrates such great Katara growth. Even if the fight in this movie had been good, it wouldn't have been that meaningful because there was no Katara development from a beginning standpoint, or like.
Yeah, like you like Katara feels helpless when she starts the series off, and she's grown so much after that you don't get a lick of that here. Not
at the beginning or the end. It just she's very, we talk about Sokka, and I'm sure we'll hit it later. You could basically just about throw both of them out and have a similar movie.
And that's sad. Cause
every time you see her, I feel like she's on the verge of trying to fake cry tears, but not quite. I don't know.
Real Katara will cry those tears real quick. She's good at it.
And then other times she wouldn't be on the verge of that emotion at all. Other times she'd just be like snap Katara confident, and it'd be interesting.
Yeah.
And it's rough.
It's really rough. This is probably this is the worst aspect of the film for me. It gets a 2 out of 10. I've never even said those words before. I never said the word 2. I just count 1, 3. But anyway, what's your score on emotion?
I was actually probably too soft on it. I gave it a 4 because I felt like it tried to be more dramatic and more tense than the TV show.
Well, I think you mentioned before when we were watching that there were some moments with Zuko and Iroh, especially when Zuko left Iroh after he faked his death.
And it was still really poorly done, but at least I felt something. Like, I felt Iroh being sad. And I feel like I said, I think it tried really hard to feel, I don't know, more mature, more dramatic or something. It did a poor job, hence the low score. Maybe not low enough, but pretty bad.
Yeah. All right, we're going to move on to action. And this movie is, like, weird with the action sequences because, like, we watched the bending in Avatar, and it's really hard-hitting. It's really impactful, and it happens pretty much instantaneously.
Really responsive, maybe?
When it comes to the movements. And here, it's like, you want to see me airbend? You want to see me make a tornado? Okay, let me do a lot of arm movements. Let me do a cartwheel. Now I'm ready.
Are those warm-ups, or are they part of the move? Like, are you stretching before you throw that move? How does that go?
And so it makes all the action sequences feel so stagnant when characters have to pause and do a dance before they can throw magic at them. Like, this is magic. You're not trying to, like, summon something with some type of Naruto jutsu.
And then there's, like, bullet time, but then it'll be intercut with not bullet time, but kind of just at a moment's notice, and it's really hard to watch.
Yeah. I can't point to, and some of the action sequences are really short lived. Also, you don't get to be in them too long. Like if that Zuko versus Aang fight, which there wasn't enough of.
It was barely a fight.
Yeah, it was barely a fight. If that was drawn out and they were actually bending the elements, and that's also one thing they fought a lot without the elements. Even people who had clear usage of the elements, they did a lot of hand-to-hand fighting, more so than I've ever seen from a bender in Avatar.
And the hand-to-hand fighting, though, weirdly, not bad.
Some of it was good. There was when Zuko was training, that was pretty good.
Yeah,
some
of that stuff was solid.
Although because it was trained, there was no conflict there.
But then it's a karate movie.
Yeah.
But for what it's worth, we're watching Avatar: The Last Airbender, and the most interesting parts of the movie were some of these martial artist sequences. That's not good.
Yeah.
Not a good time.
So for me, action gets a 5 out of 10.
I gave it the same, and we're probably being too generous.
Well, yeah, it's fine. Like, I can point to something and being like, all right, it's fine. I don't think it deserves really necessarily anything below a 5. I'm not gonna hate people for giving it. I'm not gonna hate anyone for saying this movie's the Antichrist.
I really like. There's a lot of certain scenes that stick out in my mind that are essentially action, like at the end when they're riding the Komodo dragons, and the giant waterfall, the tidal wave being created.
Yeah.
Some of the martial artist sequences. Or I think the best point that we probably made in the entire movie is there's that stupid boulder sequence in the Earth Kingdom where they all dance, and it turns out they're not actually bending. They're just doing a haka dance. And then one guy does a really big sequence throwing boulder, and it looks really stupid. And then he turns around and throws up an actual rock wall like you would do if you were an earthbender to block a Fire Nation attack, and it looked really good. And that's like the highest high and the lowest low of that movie back to back. And I was like, well, that's like a 10 and a 1, so it's a 5. That's how the movie felt to me. That's probably terrible reasoning, but whatever.
Next category.
It's not the worst facet of the film. Let's put it that way.
Well, yeah, you're right. Next category, and I think this is one we're most far off on, is comedy. And there's no comedy in this movie at all.
Did you count unintentional comedy?
I did not count unintentional comedy.
Okay.
I did laugh at some moments.
Me neither, yeah.
Though, but I didn't count that. In this part, I think it's hard to separate the source material from from the adaptation. And, I want to be objective and everything because they didn't go out and say, hey, this is going to be a straight up adaptation of it. We're going to transfer everything over. So I'm not going to give it too much
for the
crap
exact same audience.
For not being as comedic because Avatar: The Last Airbender is a really funny show. So I'm not going to give it crap for that. But I also didn't try to do anything. It tried with that one stupid Sokka joke with his mother, and that was with his Gram, and that was just so freaking dumb.
It's hard to watch.
Yeah, I don't have much to say about the comedy in this.
My score is based almost entirely on most of the comedy in the TV show comes from Aang and Sokka's characters. They're just natural charisma, and all of that is gone here. And even if it's not trying to be a comedy movie, it's like just you've almost ruined those characters by not having it. So that weighed really negatively on my harsh score. But just in general, if you've watched this at all, you know that I tend to value stupid humor way more than I should, and that shows through here.
So I give comedy a 5.5 out of 10 because it's not at least offensive comedy, and it didn't get in the way of the story. Well, how could it? It's not.
It was non-existent, so it was a very small hurdle. I gave it a 3 for all the reasons stated. Literally the least funny movie maybe of all time. Even unintentionally, it's not that funny because it's more cringy than. And the gag. So we watched the gag reel at the end, and at the very beginning, the gag reel is like okay, it's not great, but it's kind of charming, cute, and then it turns into like 2 minutes of just them dancing all over, and it's not funny or gag like whatsoever. So even the gag reel was a letdown.
The gag reel, I found the gag reel more entertaining than the movie, or the first
section of the gag reel before they just even the dancing at first, you're like, oh, that's cute, and it's like, all right, is this it now? Is that?
So go watch the gag reel. Don't. I'm kidding.
Probably don't. It's just take our word for it. It's fine.
Yes. I'm gonna throw up in my mouth again, like I did before.
Literally at the end of the movie, and I like just stopped recording. He's like, I think I just threw up in my mouth.
I'm not lying.
And we didn't catch it. Oh, I wish we would have caught it. That would have been gold.
Okay. Next category is acting, and acting in this movie. I do think we need to separate some of the actors in here because there's two that do a decent job, and then the rest do a horribly crappy, the crappiest crap you could crap job. So the two did a fairly good job. Dev Patel as Zuko, I did feel his angst a lot of the time. He wasn't getting enough to work. He wasn't getting enough material to work with, but I still feel like he went into work trying to do a good job, knowing that he's capable of doing a good job. Shawn as Iroh.
Don't say that. I mean, don't do Iroh like that. He deserves better.
It's so terrible.
Oh, we'll chalk that one up as a negative in the directing category.
Shawn did a fairly good job of being a version of Iroh that isn't as goofy, but he can still be a little bit laid back. He's still somewhat caring for Zuko. Everyone else just did horrible. Like the line delivery was just so bland and so terrible, and it was just horrendous.
I think we landed in a happy place with Iwe.
Yue?
I still say Iwe. I don't know why. It sounded like something I'd say in church. Yeah. I think we landed in a happy place with her, and there's probably little positives you could find about other things, but in general, it's easiest just to say that, yeah, there's like 2 or 3 people that did a really good job, and then everybody else was either totally forgettable or absolutely negative. That's all I got. Those 2 characters stand out is what they were given, and in the context of the movie and sort of the tone of the movie. They're not like the characters you'd expect, but they do as good as they can in that movie.
Yeah.
Thank you for being in that movie. We appreciate it.
So acting for me gets a 4.5 out of 10. If I took Iroh and Zuko out of that, it would drop down to a 1, I'm sure.
I gave it a 5 out of 10, and I kind of chalked up some of the action sequences into... I let those slide a little bit into my judgment of like, you're kind of acting and you're really good at that one specific part, hence the slightly too generous score, but 5.
All right, moving on to the next category of directing or just producing everything behind the scenes. There were so many, I don't want to say that, you don't want to use the word creative choices, but there are so many choices made.
Creative is not always good, I guess. That sounds really bad, but it might be a good metaphor.
You had to get creative to just be spoon-fed Avatar: Last Airbender, and then be like, I'm gonna get creative with this. I'm gonna change names. I'm gonna take out some story elements. I'm gonna crunch all these episodes in here. So maybe creative is the word for it, but nonetheless, the directing in this movie is horrendous on so many levels. I mean, the way he directed the actors. If he got back the dialogue he was getting back and was like, as a director, cut. That's great. Let's move on. No, you're a bad director. You should have asked for more from your actors at that point. And then yeah, the word changes, and just the way this movie is edited, it's so
Why would
choppy.
you go through the trouble of changing words and names? Why would you even bother with that? How is that a spot where you take any creative liberty?
I don't know. I really don't know.
Nobody, right? It sounds like I'm mad at the camera or something. Nobody. This is as close as I'll get to being sort of like dramatically mad at the film. Is there so many like stupid things? Like, why would you even waste the time or energy to do that?
Yeah, I don't know. I would say this, to bring in some bright side stuff here. The Komodo dragon looked pretty cool.
They were great. And at one point there was like two of them like sliding through the door, and they even looked great, like fitting through the archway together.
And like
they looked
ice
legit.
was melting around them and stuff.
Yeah. It looked like it could have been any other big budget fantasy film Komodo dragons.
Maybe a rough rhino would look better, but I like the Komodo dragon. It looked pretty good.
It's good. We commented several times on, or at least I did. I was really impressed with some like the background scenery and things like that. Looked really cool. Maybe not perfect or refined, but it looked like a big budget movie that it's supposed to be at certain points. And those I think fall into the directing category.
Yeah, one of the other things that I think was done fairly well but didn't fit necessarily with the film was the score done by James Newton Howard.
I probably didn't give that enough credit. That was
there was some good things happening there that I think really sort of informed what was happening in the story. But granted, that style of music, and this is admittedly subjective, that style of music didn't fit as well to Avatar as the original music fit, beautifully done by Jeremy Zuckerman.
If you closed your eyes and you weren't paying attention to what this movie was, and you're just listening to this as a soundtrack, you might say, that's a really nice sounding movie soundtrack for. I commented on it was like a James Cameron Avatar soundtrack. Yes, maybe not quite to that production value, but generally nice. I should have given that more credit. And then also I'm realizing that I was probably accounting for the Komodo dragons in the good acting part, because those fake Komodo dragons acted great. And even, the characters riding them looked very natural, and sometimes it really looks awkward in CGI stuff. So I should have reallocated some of my points. It would have come out the same basically, but I should have reallocated in this category. But there's some good to be had. This is probably the most dramatic part of of the highest highs of the movie intersecting with the lowest lows of the movie in the directing category.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, because we were watching, we're like, man, yeah, those dragons look good. Yeah, man, this music is hitting kind of the right spot here. And then just the rest of the things that I put into directing and behind the scenes of producing, just drug this down. So for me, it gets a 5 out of 10.
My favorite part was at the very end scene, again, the tidal wave scene, and we were commenting, we're like, oh, this is kind of cool. It actually had some amount of build up to it or whatever. And then it's like 30 seconds later, like, all right, this is too long. Yeah.
And
and then it has no climax, and it is just too long. I was too harsh. I said a 3 out of 10. Again, if I could reallocate a little bit, I would. But ultimately, I think my overall score would be the same. Long story short, I was just very upset about the most things in this category.
Yeah. That's understandable. So that brings my weighted average score to a 5.0 out of 10. That seems very objective, because I hate this movie for a lot of reasons. I earned
you feel personally attacked by this movie.
Yeah, I for so long thought to myself, I had a real hate for M. Night Shyamalan, and I love a lot of his movies. I had real hate for him. Thought if I see him on the street, might punch him in the face. I'm not that type of person. I never get.
Would you check and make sure he's M. Night Shyamalan first? Like, can I please see your ID?
It's like that John Mulaney.
That guy looks like Hitler. So we've been dying for a John Mulaney reference this whole time.
If I saw Hitler on the street, one thing I'm not good at realize who people are.
You mean like Hitler?
This innocent guy.
Old man.
Yeah. Shout out to John.
I'm just saying, don't try to punch a person that looks like M. Night Shyamalan.
Me and M. Night were cool now. I really love the movie Split, and I really love the movie Glass. Even though so many people didn't love Glass, I love it. All right, so what was your? Did you try to give your rating on your directing?
On directing, I did a 3, yeah, and I said it's too low. But in general, it would have all leveled out if I'd redo it. But then my 4.3 overall, and I think that is probably what I expected going in to come out with well below average, but not sort of offensively, intentionally. It's not a cash grab. They did not cheap their way through this movie, I didn't feel. So it didn't offend me in that sense.
So that brings our weighted average score to about a 4.6, 4.7, yeah. Somewhere around there. 4.65.
I probably, honestly, I would just ignore my rating and I would just pay attention to yours because you actually do this more often. But the point is, I asked him for context, and I think normally you probably wouldn't do this, but he gave me some other movies for context, and relative to some of the other things that he had done, it felt appropriate. I thought. Yeah. Both horror scores, I mean.
So do you have any subjective thoughts, like compared to the show?
Subjective thoughts, I would say, I will go back and say, when I think of really offensively bad movies, and I love video games, so I've seen some really bad movies, I think of just blatant, horrible, horrible cash grabs. And I don't get that feeling from this movie. I just get a feeling of, why is this person directing this movie, and what in the hell is he going for? Subjectively, after watching this, if 2 additional movies had come out, I'm so bored into just disappointment with this movie that I would not watch either of those other 2 movies. I would not come back to this house and sit in this basement to watch the movies. For other reasons, I would come back to this house. So again, it's not a pure hatred. It's just complete apathy and just willingness to forget it ever happened. And everybody else is willing to do that too.
Things that the movie didn't do that I hate that it didn't do because it didn't follow the show. One thing, the music didn't tie closely. There are some story elements, like Aang pretty much mastered the Avatar state by the end of this film. The thing is, I can see how Brian and Mike really hated trying to consult M. Night on this, because they're probably like, no, he can't master the Avatar state in the first book. That's not how it happens.
And M. Night's like, okay, but what if he did?
So I hate that. I hate that they didn't use the ocean spirit in this movie. It's such a huge part of the finale. Like, that's such a huge scene.
Ocean spirit, that's a big one. I'm gonna say the way that they treated the characters of Sokka, yes. Primarily Sokka, but then Aang and Katara. Well, every character, but just I'm gonna say Sokka being a very close character for me was another sort of directly offensive, terrible use of that character. And I feel like there was one more that we were really harping on that was a big. I mean, there's plenty of major things, but Appa didn't really have a role in this story.
Yeah, Appa.
They hid him away a lot, maybe for cost reasons. I just said it's not a cash grab, and they probably hid him. He had I lumped that into the character, so just very, very poor treatment of the characters in general, and then no fish spirit.
Yeah, you would have had no idea that Aang and Appa were best friends. Like when Appa gets kidnapped in a possible sequel to this movie that happened in some alternate universe.
Even alternate universes hate this movie.
You'll be like, why is Aang so mad? Like, that's just his pet.
But I actually thought of the other thing that I was thinking of originally was treating Aang's past lives, and instead, I love dragons. But he doesn't need the most fascinating part of being the Avatar is the past Avatar lives. Yeah. Why you got to go replace that with a random spirit dragon?
And they didn't have Ko the Face Stealer. And Ko is such a creepy character.
He is, and we need Ko because we hate Kuruk, and that's integral. I don't know how to pronounce that word either. Integral?
Both, maybe.
Really disappointing. So maybe the entire spirit world aspect in every way.
I think it was lost on this film.
Was completely destroyed, and maybe I'm going to say that's probably actually the most offensive. Or you can lump it in with the lack of the spirit fish. Yeah, you can lump that in there and say that's the most offensive, egregious. I get you got to cut some things out for the big screen audience, but that's the most fascinating part of Avatar. Of being the Avatar.
So a couple of things that I actually think the movie did good, and possibly don't throw stones at me. Improved.
Don't slowly throw one stone at me with an elaborate series of dance moves.
I can easily just dodge out of. So there's maybe just one thing. Maybe I was thinking of another thing, but one thing definitely, I like the tattoos on Aang. I think they're very culturally appropriate, and also they just look really cool. That whole intricate designs and everything, and even when they glow, I think it gives off a really good visual.
We pointed out that they kept some detail when they glow, and I thought that was really cool. And just generally seeing them the whole way up his back in such fine detail is really neat. And it seems like a small part of Avatar, but when you're fishing for nice things, those did jump out early on in the film too. I would say the film, I would say it ended better than it started. It starts in such a jumpy, choppy, expectation butchering way. At least in the end, you get some semblance of like an actually developed scene. Not well developed, but like the last 30 minutes containing the last 3 episodes of the season feels like a cohesive story in its own right, I guess.
Yeah.
The beginning is just hard to keep up with everything that's happening, what you're feeling about characters. It's like if you didn't watch the actual TV show and watch the beginning of this movie, I don't know that you'd be confused. You'd just be like, these kids are acting very strangely. Very unusual children.
Yeah. All right. I think we're gonna wrap it there. Let us know what you think about the film. If there was anything, absolutely anything you thought was actually good from it. How did this film make you feel? Did it take you therapy to get through it? Did you want to punch M. Night Shyamalan? Please let me know. And if you like this video, please like, comment, consider subscribing. And sincerely, thank you for watching. I'm out, or we're out, whatever.
Let's go ahead and say thank you for putting up with this little experiment, this 2 podcast episode experiment with us. But it's been a lot of fun. Yeah, let us know if there's anything positive to take away. Good luck. We tried. Chris, everybody's still listening right now. I'm leaving this in. It's too late.
Yeah.
Adds character. Alright, see you guys later for real, okay?